We're doing what we're doing. Okay. Now, hopefully this time we'll have better video and audio for this session, but I'm going to make sure that I have two different recordings of it so
Okay.
that whatever happens, we'll at least have something viable to use.
Okay.
So,
I
um,
took this Google to record for, so I'm curious as well.
okay, cool. Because I'm using a screen recorder and
Okay.
I'm also using an audio kind of mixer thing. So,
Okay.
this is Miss Mariana 365 on Instagram. I am Reese Roberts, entertain the thought. Of course, I'm going to forget my own name. It's been a hectic day, but I'm excited to have this conversation because we have talked a lot about having this balance between the head and the heart and just letting people understand how those two things work together. And I'm really excited to talk about this topic today because it's something that I went through myself with having to figure out how to spread my message positively without having a negative connotation or a negative energy behind it, which was really an odd thing to deal with in my own personal journey because I felt like I was being positive, but it was coming off so negative. And I had the opportunity to teach and learn myself by just kind of analyzing the verbiage, the language that I was using to reach my audience. And it turned, when I looked, it reminded me of my mother. She went through my paper one day. She would always grade my papers with a red pen and she would say, "You're saying that too many times. Cross that out. That. And so I realized I was doing the same thing when it came to the word you. Okay. Every time I was evangelizing and talking about health and, mental health and our building relationships and spiritual development, personal development, I would say, you need to do this and you need to do that. You need to get on your game and you need to learn and you need to, and it was just so us and them, very divisive language. And it took me to, go through that part of life to understand that it was about us. It's about it's about our situation. It's about what we can do together to learn. So let's just kind of dig into that for people to kind of open up that, what that is about.
I think I definitely went through that phase, and meaning well and the end result of doing well, there's a fine line, right? And
Yes.
so, that word evangelizing, getting extreme about a situation when we're excited about it does not mean that everybody else is feeling that way, right? And
Precisely.
who wants to be bullied with an invitation to anything, right?
Mm-hmm,
That's
mm-hmm,
contradictory. Like, I'm inviting you to this knowledge, to this wisdom, to this way of life,
mm-hmm,
and I'm going to pump you and talk down to you
mm-hmm.
because you're not at my level, as if achieving that level might not have just been 2-3 weeks ago, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes we see that in religion. Most common places where we see that when people are excited about their religion, and we don't even need a single one out. Just anytime someone is a newborn to their religion, or
Mm-hmm.
has been anointed, or has gone through any kind of rites of passage, and it doesn't matter what type of religion it is. Oftentimes you have this feeling of like, I'm refreshed, I'm renewed, I'm restored, and I want to share this. And so the intention is great. The intention is I want to share what's working well for me.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to remember what works for you is not for everybody. And number two, an invitation should generally be pleasant. And I see this happening, even beyond religion. I see it happening with food, right? Like, I've been vegan, I've been vegetarian, I've been a meat eater, I've been at different things at different times in my life. And I've even had to look back at how at points in times I would kind of take the superiority thing talking to other people because I felt like they weren't elevated or as aware, or our magic word, you're not conscious,
Oh,
right? And
yes.
I think that's where it starts to get even more toxic. And I saw one of my sister friends post that. She goes, you know what? For the vegan vegetarian community, I enjoy when you share tips. But if it gets to the point where being healthy of the body means your mind is going to become toxic and how you interact, perceive, and treat others, then which one is better? Is it
Right.
okay to kale all day and be healthy, which is beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
I eat vegan and vegetarian food, even though I also eat other foods. But if the cost or the requirement is now that I'm sharing it with other people, I've got to make them feel bad about who they are and where they are at the journey. I don't know. I think that's just putting the toxic nature in another, space in our life, and that's our mind
Mm-hmm.
and how we're thinking about other people.
I totally agree. It kind of lends it an ear to um that the connection between the mind and body, because when you say what's the trade-off there, to me I feel like they should be feeding each other. One of the benefits of us changing our diets and being healthier is it's supposed to give us clarity of the mind. It's supposed to help us with aligning our energies and our chakras. So I'm going to say this to all the influencers out there in this space of mental and personal and spiritual development. You don't have to check yourself, because you start projecting and you start telling on yourself when we get that way. So I think we all need to be very, very mindful of that, not just on the individual level, but especially when we're addressing the general public with a message that's supposed to be more divine, something that's supposed to feel like an invitation. Because like you said, it doesn't feel good if you're going to beat me over the head with something that's supposed to help me. And so it kind of just takes away from the general message of what we're supposed to be given to people mentally. It's supposed to feel like food. And I want to say, I think that there's a cultural implication here, because the way we're groomed, especially in the quote unquote Black community, I prefer more accurate terms like indigenous or native people, but for the sake of the conversation, Black people in our community, we've been groomed a lot of times, especially the women, to be very hard and very masculine and very, cold in ways. And I think it might just be because of that we haven't really fully healed those places in our hearts where we can have a message that comes from a softer place, or have a message that comes from a place of not necessarily judgment, but just seriously, I have a good intention or a good will towards men. And I don't know, I think that maybe we should think about what we're doing in our personal walk to say that we've completely healed before we start stepping to the community to help other people heal. Because I think it's important of what you said. It's like, what is the trade-off? If you're going to kill me in 5 different ways just to heal me in one, I probably don't need that.
Feel good.
It doesn't.
True. Like, people want to feel good. So why can't, if something is of good and it's supposed to inspire good, like, it shouldn't be like a lashing.
Right.
And I'm big on discipline. Like, I live a very disciplined life. And, I've had people tease me about this high level of discipline. Mm-hmm. But I think the difference is in how I'm walking now, or doing my best to walk now, is to understand that it's my discipline. When we talk about self-care and self-healing and self-restoration, like, it's for me. It's a very private, sacred thing. Mm-hmm. Most people, even when it comes to religion or spirituality or diet and stuff, unless they ask, when I'm on, any platforms that I'm speaking, those are personal life events. How I make my money, who I'm with, all these kind of things. Those are personal, sacred things. And I share a lot of myself. So the only time I really get to, one of my favorite words is we got to be careful with the pontificating, yes. Being on this high, horse. And what I notice is I do live a disciplined life, and I do see the results of it. And people respond to that more than what I tell them that they should do. And at a point in my life when I was telling other people what they should do, or offering, I had a bad habit of offering advice when it wasn't even asked for. Like, some people, I'm just giving advice away, and then wondering why people were feeling convicted or overwhelmed because they weren't at that level or weren't really looking for it. And then I take it personal that you didn't want to take this good night. And what I learned is like, oh, like, you didn't ask. And really, business what you're doing on your journey. Now, if I walk the talk and I just live this disciplined way, if people see the results and they're ready, they're gonna ask. They're gonna come and ask, what are you eating? How are you working out? How are you doing your budgeting? How are you, achieving your goals with your business? People will ask, and that's the opportune time. And if you do want to point a right, then it's worth it. So sometimes we just have to be very aware, like you said, just becoming very aware. That was one of the big corrections that I did, is in public speaking that I do a lot. I just changed that you and I to we. That's right. Because that doesn't mean I might be giving advice on something. It doesn't mean I'm not in the midst of learning it and applying it myself. So it's a we thing. Absolutely.
Especially because it's usually an ongoing growth process for anybody to grow and develop personally and spiritually. So it does give people space, Yeah. It gives you space when you say, you know what, this is something that we're doing together. And even though I may be a little bit further or somewhere else on the spectrum, maybe not further or closer, but It's just something that we're both doing on a sliding scale. And I think one of the things I felt was important to bring out here is just that where the ego sits in all of this, because yes, because I think there's a natural inclination to do that, where it's the finger pointing versus the inclusive language. And I know that comes out of the egotistical soul. It comes from the person who wants to inflate themselves or seem bigger or more intelligent or more proper or more disciplined or whatever the case, which is the reason why they're using that divisive language. So I'm thinking there should be some kind of I don't know, remedy for how we can correct that. I mean, the way I did it personally was just becoming personally aware of myself and the things that I had been doing or not doing in my own walk, and remembering that I am the same as these other people. They're no different. And I didn't want to be accusatory. I don't want to accuse anyone of something that more than likely I'm doing myself. So do you have any other ways that you might suggest for somebody to kind of just wake up into this frame of mind where they're recognizing when they're doing things like this?
No, my thing is, instead of flaunting my ego, sharing what I could do to be a hero. And I have to be a hero to myself first. When I see something lacking in myself, when I see something that needs improvement, it's easy to want to be a hero to somebody else, which, requires us to put a cape on. I was always caping. I was always cape on, right? And I realized, like, I need to save myself first. Like, that's a great neutralizer. And remembering, like, we're all in this space. Like Big Mama say, I'm a work in progress, So to me, I think that there's two sides to an ego. I think that there's a fine line between being confident and proud and wanting to represent, like, when your family say, when you walk out of this house, you represent me, right? That confidence and pride versus the ego of wanting everything to be centered around you, around being right, around having the highlight placed on you. And, if we're not careful, that's really condoned in, cyber world. Like, everything about this cyberspace and this being online is constantly centering things around us. And so I think when I see ego trying to creep in, I think of Tony Baker. I don't know if you follow Tony Baker. He's a comedian. He does a lot of the voiceovers for the animals.
Yes, I love Tony Baker.
And comedy is a real quick way to kind of like bring you back down when you're thinking you're the end all be all. But there's this one sketch that Tony Baker does that I love with the apes. And, he's going around talking about, I'm the one that did this. I'm the one that did that. And that's how apes do. They pound their chest. So I see that ape in me get to the point where, like, I'm requiring someone to give credit to me. The bottom line is I'm not being present enough for myself to just acknowledge and validate myself. Anything extra is like icing on the cake, and I'm not even a person that likes a lot of icing on my cake, literally. Like, if I know that I'm getting the results, I'm seeing the changes in my life, that is enough from the creator and from the universe to give me the approval to know that I'm going in the right direction. If I'm seeking it out for other people, that means that I'm lacking on the actual, like, the deeds that need to be done. If I'm more concerned about if I'm more concerned about, being cited for my words and my work and things like that, at the end of the day, I'm the only one that could do it the way I could do it for myself and for others.
Better preach.
I'm not the only motivational speaker out here. I'm not the only personal and professional development person out here. There's tons of us, but somebody needs it exactly how I give it. And those appreciators, like I always say, I don't really need fans, because fans go round and round. They come and go with trends. I appreciate appreciators. Those that truly value me and appreciate me, they're going to willingly give me my flowers. I don't have to beg. I don't have to boast. I don't have to, feel left out. That means I'm in the wrong circle with the wrong people. And I'm looking for validation from the circles that aren't valuing me. So that ego thing where I need to center it around myself, that's kind of why I went into journalism and storytelling and things, because I had to learn, like, it's one thing to get on the stage and always know how to rock the crowd, but do you know how to make spaces for people to tell their story just the same? So I'm a Leo, so I got to keep my ego in check, because, I got several houses in Leo on my chart, so I'm not careful, and that's about being self-aware, like, not keep myself, but being aware that some strong qualities can get abusive if I'm not making sure to balance that and sharing this world with everybody that I chose to come to this planet with.
Wow, that is so profound. Okay, I'm just so glad that you said it that way because it perfectly segues into the next thing I wanted to ask you, because I think it's important to have this kind of perspective about what it means internally when you're doing that. A lot of people don't really get a chance to see themselves and know where all this stuff is coming from. They don't even know they're doing it. So I want to, pinpoint really specifically what is it? Because what I'm hearing is that it's, I know you teach heavily around safety, and I feel like there's a little element of the inner child wanting to be safe. And that's the reason why they're looking for that validation, or they're looking for those accolades to be given to them, but they want to force it because they fear in some way that they won't get it, or that it won't be recognized. But I think one of the biggest things that anybody can take from what you just said was the work that needs to be done. And in my personal journey, what happened with me in all of this, and I kept saying, I might have said this before, but I kept saying over and over again, I'm grown. I'm grown. I'm grown. Don't talk to me like that. I'm grown. I just kept hearing myself saying that. And something like in the little subconscious, little still silent voice in the back of my head said, if you was really grown, you wouldn't have to keep saying that. And it shocked me into my own body. And I just immediately was like, oh, like, and it turns, I think that a lot of people really should recognize that this is about the same thing. Is that if you're constantly speaking it and saying it and validating and constantly going over it, bringing it up, more than likely it's not real to you. You haven't done the work to convince yourself that it's real. So you just keep trying to speak it up because you just think that maybe if you convince others that it'll be real to them, and you can keep on your face of fronting and your mask. And if our society could change just that aspect of how we're interacting with each other, especially when it comes to us attempting to help each other heal, I really think we would be doing a huge service to push ourselves forward down that road of healing when we're taking out that divisive language in us, trying to put us above them or them different from us. It just doesn't jive with the whole spirit of what we're trying to build, and I think in our society right now. And I also want to say that I do believe our people are really driving social change right now. So we have to be very careful about how we're doing things, because I truly believe the rest of the world is looking at us to see how we're going to come out of this mess. And I want to say this kind of off topic a little bit, but the Palestinian conflict that's going on right now, this young lady, it's very tragic that they're going through that. And so, of course, I don't want to have a lack of empathy here, but I do want to say there was a person in the comments that was like, Black people, y'all do everything you can to partner and be in unity with the Palestinians. And while that's all great, and I do not have any issues with that, I raised the question to the young lady and asked her, well, what do you guys think about our families and the destitute communities that we have that have been destroyed? What should we do about that in the midst of us supporting you in your situation? Right. Understanding the concept of healing at home before you go out into the world to fix everything everywhere else. And I think that just sort of abstractly relates to what we're saying, because in our communities, in our homes, in ourselves, we have to get home done and ready before we can go out and say, oh, Palestinians, now we can help heal your communities and unify with you after we've gotten our communities together,
It's just not safe. So, working in safety, working in the advocacy in crisis, and definitely physical, but I find in the heart when I'm working on trauma healing, educating folks on trauma-informed care. I really like, it resonated with me what you said about, when people are over-announcing, it's usually a strong indication of overcompensating. Mm-hmm. And when we're overcompensating, it's often the times we've had experiences throughout our childhood or various forms of our development where it's like, we didn't get this from maybe our divine masculine figure, our divine feminine figures that, we chose on this planet. Maybe we didn't get it. So for the rest of our life, we're overcorrecting and we're overstating. And what I kind of call that is, it's more or less like an immature, it's kind of an immature form of manifestation, right? Because when we're trying to manifest something, we're trying to, bring it into our world. And so some people do it verbally by over announcing it. I notice this a lot with folks that feel misunderstood. A lot of the times what they say is, I'm the type of person, instead of just being the type of person and allowing people to observe it. They have to overstate it. It's a form of manifestation, but it's a way that can kind of get lost in the universal sauce, right? Because when overstating it, and it starts to become this false sense of a reality, like this false sense of masculinity, where men have to overstate how masculine they are. Right. Over, sexuality, where we gotta, just everything about us has to ooze sexuality.
Right.
That's all we are. And really, that's what the world has assigned to us to get us that ego stroke and that attention that we want. But when we start doing that self-work, when we start kind of going within and realizing like, oh, like, I really don't have to be macho, all the way around. And that still doesn't take away from my manhood, or, I don't have to be a sex kid in 24 hours. Like, and I'm still, attractive, without all these extra additives at times as well. It's like we're overcompensating and trying to manifest. And so I think if someone finds themselves in that phase in their life, I'm really big on making sure people walk away with some to-dos, not just, my opinion and my thoughts. But I think if a person's in a place where they're really trying to, mature their form of manifestation, check yourself when you're making announcements about yourself. Announcements about what we are and what we aren't, that could be seen as advocating. But if it's showing up in our actions, very rarely do we have to put it on a loudspeaker and make sure that people hear it. Usually people feel it and they'll confirm it and they'll tell you. When I started to realize I was really doing the work, when I didn't listen very well, because I'm a talker, I had to learn through life to be a better listener. And when I first started focusing on being a better listener, I would joke with people like, did I do good? Did I listen better? And then eventually, that was in the core manifestation, right? I was trying. Right. But like a kid's like, did I do good? Did I get a treat now? And after a while, when I started realizing the work was actually showing up, number one, my priority wasn't waiting on somebody to say it. And number two, people said it organically and naturally. And that's a good compliment, right? It's like, somebody say you fine or you this, you that, and they give you a typical compliment, it's cool. But when somebody says, wow, I really like how you look into my eyes intently and you kind of lean forward.
Right. Oh, give me the details.
When somebody's paying attention to details,
yes.
And gives you a compliment, that's something totally different.
Very
than,
different.
Assigning someone to tell it to you, or, it's like forcing someone to say, I love you. Once you do it, it's kind of like, well, it's not the same. Like, I had to tell you to do this for me. So I think just transitioning from being all talk to understanding, like, I wanted to leave this planet, making sure to share spaces with people better. There'll always be people ready to clap for me as an entertainer, as an educator. There'll always be people there. But what I really wanted people to know is like this is for me to share with you. It's not all for me, right? This powerful feeling that I'm having, I want to share it with you. And I don't need to over-announce it. I don't need to be on a megaphone and a loudspeaker. If it's organic and real and present, people will reflect it back to me. And that's humbling. Like, it hits different when you get attention without seeking it. It hits different when you get attention from a very organic, loving, authentic, unexpected space. A lot of the times, if I'm really about my business and doing my work, first of all, I'm so enthralled and excited about doing my work, whether it's the work that I do in serving community or the work I serve myself. Like, if I'm working out, I'm not going on with a full face makeup and trying to look like, Candy Girl. Like,
okay.
Not anybody who does, but like, I'm going to get ugly and sweaty and nasty. If my drawers aren't moisturized when I leave, I'm up in it. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
Those moments where Coach be like, you got an in today.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
did I?
Or, if I'm teaching a training in a workshop and, I'm animated and really connecting with people and I'm seeing all this engagement. And then at the end, I come out of that trance of being gone and people are like, oh my God, this is the best training I had in my life. And I'm like, dang,
yes.
Right? Process with you. And it's different when you're not looking for that.
Right.
And it helps your mental health as well. I think a lot of people are painting themselves into a corner and missing their mark on what their purpose is in a particular situation or circumstance when we're so busy chasing for or trying to project an experience instead of just like living in it and being present.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you said that, because it to have the presence of what it all requires. I mean, I feel like presence is what it is required in order to achieve this.
Yeah.
If a person is not present within themselves with all of these things, being checking whether or not they're making announcements of themselves all the time, being aware of when it's time to let somebody else share, or not waiting for your chance to get in there so you can say what you're trying to say, but you're giving the person the time to breathe the conversation out or let them get their, get things off their chest. Being present enough to know how to read their own actions, because like you said, if it's showing up in my actions, it should be very obvious that I don't have to say it. So I think all of these things require presence. And then the last thing about just having the peace, I really think that this is also about kind of sort of like choosing your battles of when you were talking about earlier, giving advice when it wasn't really solicited. I feel like some of those things is it has to do with choosing your battles. You don't always have to give the advice just because somebody seems to be in a pickle. I mean, people figure things out every day, and you should let that happen. But one thing I did want to say, in addition to all these things, is that people really to get out of this frame of mind where you have to really beat people over the head and really be the one to always be giving the advice or always giving something, that is typically unsolicited. I think the best thing to do is to become interested in become interested in people. That is a beautiful switch to make when it comes to, especially us like influencers or people who are coming to the business world as entrepreneurs to help others. If you're not interested in what is going on in other people's lives or what is in their minds, how are they experiencing things, to me, I feel like you're more self-serving than you're providing a service, and it just doesn't it doesn't work the same or feel the same for the audience or for the intended person that you're giving that to. So I think we really have to focus on just humbling ourselves and remembering that this world is not revolving around us. People are in different places at different times for different reasons, and if we're going to help, we have to understand all those elements first. And that having that listening ear and just being interested in what's going on in the world of other people, I think that's a really good step ahead to say, okay, let me be quiet. I'm gonna listen. What you got to say? Because I need to, I want to help. And I think that might be what differentiates a person who is genuine from a person who is not genuine. When they genuinely want to help, I think it becomes a bit natural. It's like a natural progression for people to quiet so that they can listen, so that they can actually provide the help, because otherwise it's just going to come off as a bunch of, what? I didn't say that I needed that, or I didn't say that was me. I found that to happen with me a lot, that I'll be trying to give that unsolicited advice and people be like, well, that's not really me. Yeah, they'd be like, well, I don't do that.
That's a big thing that I've also had to work on with more intention is, first of all, knowing when to dial up and dial down. Naturally, I'm a very energetic person. Mm-hmm. And what I had to realize is just because I'm ready to go rah, 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 and I jump out the bed and, before the sun comes up and I'm excitable all the time, doesn't mean that that's not the temper that I need to have throughout all of how I'm applying and being of service. So learning one analogy that I use with a lot of clients when we're doing refresh sessions is when they're having communication issues, is to imagine their communication chakra as one of two things. If they're more technology minded, I'll say like a old school camera, how when you're a shutter on a camera, sometimes you have to close it and open it up to allow more light to come in, and that will change the exposure and how a picture is seen. For people who are a little bit more natural based or, earthy, I'll use the analogy of a rose or a flower. When it decides to open, it twists open, right? And so dialing up and dialing down. So when I'm working with clients who are having communication issues and they're like, I communicate too much. I mean well, but everything just spills out the mouth. Or people are like, not communicating enough and, it's affecting my interpersonal communication. I say, what do you need to do to are you overexposing and letting too much light in that picture frame and that experience? Or do you need to dial it down some in order to make sure that, you're being too far in the dark? Or, is this rose? A lot of the times a rose will open slowly and surely. So when I'm actually, on stage or delivering keynotes and things like that, if I find myself like, and now I can temper it a little smoother, but I just share that as a tool because sometimes people need those visuals or those little analogies, and it will help you make that adjustment in that moment. So like if you're oversharing, if you're dominating the conversation, if you're dominating the spaces, it doesn't mean you're not a rose still. It doesn't mean that your picture and what you're capturing or what you're casting and sharing in that photo of that moment isn't important, but you don't want to overexpose it and then certain elements and hues of that picture gets lost. You don't want to underexpose it and it's too dark and you don't illuminate and shine light on what's important. So when people are in that space of, like you said, being influencers or, being motivational speakers, sometimes people when we're in kicking it mode, they're like, I used to always be giving advice, and one of my good friends, one of my best friends, and I love her to death and through life for me. One day I asked her, I was like, why don't you call me to kick it? And she's like, don't nobody want to hear all that consciousness all the time? No! Let me tell you, the Leo went home licking her paw, like, I was hurt. But through my maturity, I realized, first of all, she's an unfiltered, loving friend. Yeah. She didn't say it to hurt me. Number two, it was an honest depiction of like, no, like, is that what I'm doing? That's a perfect example of what a lot of folks do. Even though I meant well, I was dialed up and I was taking, all possible human connections hostage to try to pontificate, you know what I mean? And so now I've learned that that's imbalance because some people will come around at chill time and they're like, yo, you're laid back, you're chill, you're not like how you are on stage or when you're performing, when you're teaching. It's like, yeah, I am just like a regular lady. I'm goofy. I like to have fun. I like to be silly. Like, I'm not always on. Right. It's exhausting, and you don't give yourself that space you talked about to be the fullness of all sides of you. So I'm not an educator. I'm not an entertainer 24/7. Sometimes I'm just a mom. Sometimes just a sister. You know what I'm saying? So I had to give myself that freedom of not having to be on 24/7 and take a moment to be this grand performance of rest.
Right. Sometimes I get a little, I want to say worried about having that balance because sometimes I'll let I'm at home Sharice, turned up Sharice, spill over into my little Instagram page. I'd be like, girl, delete that. You're not that. You can't do that on social media, child. I'd be like, oh, girl, but I'm just a human. I realize I'm just a human being. And sometimes I think in the social space, especially people who have eyes on them or people who are calling attention to themselves for that purpose, for business reasons, that we kind of forget that there is this balance. But I do want to talk and speak up the fact that there's a very delicate balance right there, knowing when to dial up and when to dial back. And I'll say this, especially for our women, and I hate to single out a particular group, but I want to say that in the Black community, Black men are not as vocally expressive as women are. And so I do want to say for our women, I think in our relationships in general, whether they be romantic or professional, this is a delicate balance that we have to work on. Okay. I really believe we have to work on that delicate balance of when to speak, when to turn it up, when to put in the opinions, when to have when to fight the battle, versus when to let things naturally unfold. And I mean, when it comes to men, I will say again, this is something that we really have to work on because having this delicate balance of, kind of just when to evangelize, period, whether it has anything to do with healthcare, consciousness, anything, the advice, when to evangelize. Sometimes we hurt more than we help when the timing is not right. And like you said, it can either make a great picture or it can completely ruin it. And I don't know where we can tap ourselves into a particular source or energy to fix that. But I think maturity, of course, is going to be a starting point for us to, like we talked about earlier, being more interested in other people and really having this self-awareness. But however we get there, I really do think it's an important destination to reach so that we know this balance of this throat chakra, us having that communication center, it's just so important for us to be able to control that thing. I mean, because it can be as medicinal as we want it to be, or it can be as toxic as we don't want it to be. And so, for us to not have control over it, it kind of messes up that manifestation that we're trying to do. We have to get that under control.
I totally respect, identify, and relate. I'm just now becoming a high level communicator. Although if you would have asked me that 5-10 years ago, I've always been.
Yes, same.
Being a woman in this society, from my immediate, personal life experiences, all the way down to looking at, patriarchy, how it shows up at its best. Like, I think it's one thing, and I said this in another interview. It's one thing to be unapologetic. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to know how to apologize. Nice. It's one thing to not want to be controlled. It's another thing to learn self-control. And me understanding those things about myself does not make me any less powerless. And one distinct tool that I've had to learn, with my sister friends, with my, loved ones, with my family, is when it is time to have discourse, when it is time to talk, no matter if it's just, or I should say, if it's like intimate conversation or meaningful conversation, maybe there's venting going on, or maybe there is advice to be given or received, like making sure to stop and just ask, like, did you want a response or did you just want to talk and vent? That was my life.
That's good.
Like, just stopping. And before going to this automatic knee-jerk, I want to save you thing, a person might not want to be saved in that moment. A person might just want you to be in this experience to say, this sucks. Yeah, it does suck. And that doesn't mean you're powerless. That means you're being present and you're acknowledging the feeling. It's not, you resort back to that inner child work where nobody listened to you and now you're over it. So, me doing inner child work is not doing just my inner trauma healing and helping to facilitate that for others to heal themselves, but trauma healing is listening. And anytime we're talking about trauma or our issues or our mental health, it starts with storytelling. And for someone to tell a story, there has to be someone to behold it and listen. And so one of the immediate tools that I would offer anyone, especially for the women that, we're addressing right now, is you might mean well. You might want to fix it. You might want to put your cape on. But one of the most powerful things you can do is just ask somebody, did you just want to tell me and have me listen right now? Did you just need to vent? Do you want feedback or do you need help? Because a lot of women, especially Black women on this planet, are always in this space of talking about how we're worn down or we're tired. Where guess what? Some of that's from that unsolicited caping that we're doing. I might not be asking for you to save them, but because you allocate them their savior, and then because they didn't ask, they didn't know they needed to actually say thank you, or because they are in crisis mode, they don't have the energy or the remembering to say thank you. We go back, oh, I'm the one that did this.
That's right.
Did someone even ask for you to do that? Because if that was some extra that you had to give, they were receiving it the way they needed it, but this is not a tit for tat thing.
Right.
So it bleeds over into the whole, well, I'm an empath. You could be over empathetic as well, right? You could be over empathetic to the point where you feel for somebody so much that you interject yourself or create a codependent situation, and then you walk away feeling used and abused and overseen and underheard and not valued. Well, it's like, if you make sure to make it clear when you're giving or when somebody wants to receive, what are those boundaries? A lot of the times you won't overstep them even in goodwill. And so I'm not as tired as I am anymore because I'm not caping all the time. If someone asks for me and I don't have it, I say clearly, I don't have that to share right now. I don't have that to share today. And if you see someone in need and it's in my heart to give, I ask them. Now I ask them, do you want help? Do you need help? Do you want feedback? If not, shut up and listen.
Right.
And that's all the help someone needs. First, I remember my daughter broke my heart one day. I think it was like 8th grade. And she was like, you talk and you teach all day to people, but you don't listen.
Baby, I would have been like, I'm sorry.
Right? And I held on to that. Held on to that. Was resentful. But when I went back to school and I majored in communication and I took interpersonal communication classes, which I advise whether you're a communication major or not, take you a community college interpersonal communication class. It will help your personal and professional relationships tremendously. And that's where I had to come to terms with, I'm a good communicator, but I was not a high level communicator, especially in moments with the loved ones and the people that I needed in my life the most. Now I can walk away from conversations sleeping well at night. I don't sit around with the I should have, could have, would have said this, or oh, my foot is not in my mouth as often. More responsible and a lot more control. That's what I would offer to, and I don't feel any less powerful. You know, like I don't think, you know, brothers respect me any less. I don't think sisters respect me any less. I don't think my community respects me any less just because I know when to dial down. Because guess what? It increases my value. If I'm running my mouth constantly and always giving gems constantly, well then we always know she always giving up the good. But if I dial back and speak when it's most necessary, when it's value. You always run around talking about I'm not worthy. Nobody values me. Well, are you giving up all your value of wanting to overspeak, and then you don't know how to calm down and, you know, allow people to seek you out when they actually need it and want it.
That's so beautiful. And I think it does give us room to have our peace and to recuperate and to really, you know, feel more value whenever we have, you know, it's kind of like Bitcoin of all things, where you have only a couple of coins out there, so they have more value when more people are looking for it. So yeah, I completely get that. And I know I'm gonna have to probably call one of my girlfriends, because I have a girlfriend where she's always, I don't know why, but I think it's just naturally, I assumed that she would be asking for advice because she would always be telling me all her problems. And so, or just, you know, stuff that's going on that she's talking about. So I just naturally be like, well, girl, you should do this. And then you should do that. Or you should do this. And one day she was like, Sharice, you know, sometimes I just want you to just listen. And I was just like, what? She was like, you don't have compassion. My girlfriend got me right together. And I told her, I said, well, if me trying to help you is not compassion, I'm going to have to go look up the definition, because I don't know what is. And so we got into a little discussion about compassion, because I felt that what I was giving her was compassion. I think that might be somewhere where a lot of us kind of are sitting, where we feel like, well, this is my friend. I'm giving the advice because I'm trying to help. And it feels naturally, you know, the right thing to do. But a lot of times I'm going to tell you, sis, is not. So we have to find alternatives like what's being brought out in this conversation, because it just does something better for both parties. You know, for us to have that place where this is either we're going to choose which direction we're going in. We're going to choose the advice or choose not to, you know, do all that extra, but to just sit in it and let it breathe a little bit. So I know you've got to wrap up, so I'm going to give us a minute to give last comments or whatever. You can let everybody know how to reach you. And then I'll let you go to your next engagement.
You know, just kind of reflecting on this whole conversation. I always enjoy talking to you. You know, we just randomly met each other online. Yes. Actually, not randomly. What's our comedian friend? Oh, gosh. Connected us. He just like threw me in one of your chats one day and was like, you need to connect.
I can't even remember.
Brother from Wild and Out. I can't remember.
Gosh, I can't remember either. It must have been a minute ago, like a year ago, too.
Going on in my mind, but first of all, I always enjoy, you know, our conversation. We don't talk often, but when we do, it's big. You know, it's colossal, and I need that in my life. I think one thing that I realized when we're talking about nurturing and protecting and maturing and healing, especially our metaphysical selves and our metaphysical relationships, is understanding the process. And what I, you know, have the deep reminder of today is before you can get to problem solving, you have to clearly assess what the issues are.
Correct.
And that discourse and that conversation that we have with our loved ones when they're just expressing is actually that part where you're exploring and getting a full understanding. So a lot of the times when we get to taping and we want to save somebody, sometimes we can do ourselves and them a disservice if we haven't fairly assessed what the crisis is. So when we're talking about, again, me being an advocate about, you know, safety, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, you know, when people have sessions with me, when they book their refresh sessions, you know, they think I'm just going to come in giving all the advice from top to bottom. And a lot of it is them talking, because I need to fully assess and get a very good understanding of where their mind is at, where their heart is at, where their spirit is at, where their body is at. If I listen fully when it is time for me to speak and help them to begin their self-problem solving journey, I'm able to be a little bit more accurate on the probabilities that will help them. So as we continue to move forward, instead of over evangelizing, instead of over caping, instead of, over trying to convert someone to do what it is we feel that they need to be doing with their lives, why don't we get a fair assessment and allow more enrichment and presence through our engagement with people? And then Great Spirit will tell us exactly when it's time to offer. It will be asked for, it will be honorable, it will be respected, it won't be, disrespected in a way where it's not valued, and just see what happens through that. So listening in totality, listen until a person can't talk no more.
Yes.
Really, that's when it's a good time to speak. And sometimes people will figure out their own shit just by continuing to talk.
You know it. It happens all the time. It happens, and then when you one of my favorite techniques is to repeat back the same exact words to a person that they just said to me.
I hear you saying
right, and then they.
Oh
yeah. And then they're like, "Oh, I did say that." It makes a lot of sense when you say it. Yeah, no. They'd be like, thanks. They'd be like, thanks for the help. Now that's $175, please.
Great listening to you.
I love it. So this has been so absolutely fun and meaningful. I totally love the fact that it, like you said, it's very high impact when we get a chance to meet. So I'm gonna do my best to, try to facilitate some more of these conversations and make sure we do this as many times as possible because it's just so awesome. So again, you guys, this is Miss Mariana 365 on Instagram. I'm Entertain the Thought with Reese Roberts on Instagram. So please do dial into both of our pages and get you that love, get you that alignment, the balance, all of the health and wellness that you can think of. We both have some beautiful content on our pages, so make sure that you tune in, tap in, and catch us back the next time. We have some episodes in the archives as well, so go back on my podcast on Entertain the Thought and see if you can find some of those archived episodes, and just keep on coming back. So again, thank you again for coming and talking with me today, and I'm going to see you soon.
All right, sis.
All right, peace. Bye-bye.